Major League Baseball, college football, NFL, pro football. We're covering free winners in all those sports for you this Monday, September 2nd. Happy Labor Day, everybody. WagerTalk Today is here for you every Monday through Friday, noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. And I am Steve Merrill, filling in for the Prez. He is celebrating Canadian Labor Day. They actually spell it with a U up there, but they celebrate it nonetheless. And I'm joined by LABOR, American Teddy Covers, as my co-host for this Monday Labor Day. And don't forget, Teddy is prepping for opening line report in 1 hour here at 1 o'clock Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific, live right after we're on the show. So yet another reason to hit subscribe and hit that bell for instant alerts here on WagerTalk TV. And Teddy, we've got a great show here. We're covering all three major sports because it is September. We've got Bryan Leonard talking some baseball, Jesse Schule talking baseball and college football. The cat is talking baseball as we speak, and also Brian Power talking college football and NFL. He's got a futures play, plus money futures play for you at the end of the show, so stay tuned for that. Of course, Teddy also has his Bad Beats segment coming up, which is my favorite part of the week, and also a big game breakdown for a Friday night national TV college football game. So lots to get to. Let's get it off, start it right with some baseball from Bryan Leonard. And Brian, welcome to the show. You and I will be doing MLB First Pitch this Friday. And, of course, First Pitch is on at 11 a.m. Eastern, Monday through Friday, right before WagerTalk Today. There's plenty of baseball here for a couple more months. But how was your opening college football weekend, my friend?
USC worked out very well for us. 25-13 run in college football. So looking very happy in that regard.
Sorry, Brian, you were cut off. We missed half of what you said there. Can you say it again?
Yeah. Winner last night on USC, 2-2 for the week. 25-13 run in college football. And did have a loser that I thought should have been a winner. So, yeah, even though we didn't make much of a profit for the clients, I'm very happy with the start of the season.
Well, let's start talking a little MLB for today, Brian. That's where your focus is on a Monday. Your baseball season has been nothing short of spectacular in recent weeks, throughout the whole course of the campaign, for that matter. Let's talk about maybe the hottest team in baseball right now, the Chicago Cubs. They're taking on the Pirates with a guy who people thought was going to be an ace in Jones. He spent much of the year hurt. He came back. He didn't throw a gem. Talk to me about what we're going to do with the Cubs and the Pirates MLB action on the Labor Day in Chicago. This is a 7:40 Eastern time start tonight.
Well, you didn't leave me much to talk about because that was basically the points I was going to make on this game. Jared Jones, he started the year on fire, going all the way back to spring training. He was pitching at max velocity because he really wanted to make the team. He wasn't a top pitching prospect, but he was one of their better ones. And he wanted to make sure he made it to the major leagues this year. So he's pitching with maximum velocity. And we've all seen what has happened to a lot of the starters this year that came out and pitched like that early on. But he pitched maximum velocity, and he fought to make the team out of opening day. And he did so. And he looked great early on, simply blowing away opponents. He had a 2.89 ERA, 0.91 whip through mid-May. But he knew he had to dial it back a little bit if he was ever going to complete the season. And after facing the Cardinals on June 3rd, he was put on the IL. He did come back July 27th, so he missed pretty close to 2 months here. He faced the Cubs on that day, and as you talked about, the Cubs have been hitting very well. He permitted 5 earned runs in that return and only 4 innings of work. And on the season, he's in the 8th percentile in barrel rate, as well as the 12th percentile in hard hit rate. So he's been getting hit pretty good all season long since that, especially lately. No doubt he's a talented pitcher, but he's not even close to the guy that we saw early in the year. Jamison Taillon has rebounded nicely from a down 2023. He owns a 3.85 ERA, 1.20 whip. The veteran righty's not going to blow you away with his 20th percentile K rate, but he doesn't allow hard contact. And in fact, he's in the 94th percentile in walk rate. So if you're not giving up hard hit balls and you're not putting extra players on base, that's the kind of guy I want to back. Since August 10th, the Cubs have been on an offensive explosion, scoring 99 runs in only 10 games. I'm not a math major, but that's close to 10 runs a game their last 10 games out there. They're hitting the hell out of the ball right now. I think they'll get to Jones here. And, considering how well they're hitting, We can go against Jones in this situation. I don't think he's the same pitcher he was earlier in the year. This is a cheap number here for the Cubs, only laying in the 140s.
So I have a pair of follow-up, Bri. First, I want to ask you about Tyon in particular, because he really hasn't been good. The Cubs have been winning, and yet they're just 2-5 of his last 7 starts. We look at him in August. Each of his last 4 starts, he allowed 4 runs or more. Is this a pitcher we can comfortably lay a price with? That's question one. And question two is there upside for Chicago right now? Is this a team we want to be betting some futures on? Chicago to make the playoffs, Chicago to win the National League. I mean, is there silliness that we want to do with the Cubs when it comes to futures? Because they surely underachieved all year. They're playing their best ball of the year right now.
Well, with Tyon, I like Tyon. He's just a guy that I made a lot of money on this year, so I've got no problems with him. It's a lot of times he hasn't gotten a lot of run support, which obviously hurts his record. But no, he's been fine. And as for the Cubs to make the playoffs, you got to realize they're way behind, like the Braves, the Padres, and the Diamondbacks. So it's been a great run for Chicago, and I thought about that maybe a month ago. I thought that maybe there was some value on playing the Cubs, but they hadn't shown anything. Well, now it may be a little bit of too little too late in that regard, but at least if you're a Cubs fan, they continue to trot out each and every game and play good ball. That's really what you're looking for. I think they cut themselves too much of a deficit to be able to come back and make the playoffs. I don't think I could put money on them, especially now that they've done so well as of late. You're kind of late to the party if you did. So, it's just, I don't think the Cubs are going to the playoffs, but they're a team that nobody wants to face right now.
Yeah, we always talk about the expected win-loss record based on run differential. And the Cubs, for most of the season, have had a positive run differential, but their record has been weaker than what it should be. So there was some probably upside value, and they're still underachieving. In fact, they're 9 games out in the division, 3 out of a wild card spot. But if you look at their expected win-loss, they'd be tied for the last wild card. But once again, only 25 games or so remaining. It might be a little too late for a team that's won 9 of their last 10. All right, the Houston Astros started the season extremely slow, Brian. What were they? I think 9-17 out of the gate. And they have gone, if you do the math, 66-43 Probably the best record in baseball, I would believe, over the last 100 games or so. So interesting team to talk about here against the Reds, who are pretty much out of it. What are you doing with this Houston-Cincinnati game? By the way, this is a daytime game, 4 o'clock Eastern afternoon start today on Labor Day.
It certainly is, and this is a good hitting ballpark here. Justin Verlander is holding on by a thread. He's had a Hall of Fame career, no doubt about it, but he's simply not the same pitcher. Take a look at his numbers this year, and injury prone as of late, but he's been that way for the last few years. Got 3-4 record, 4.16 ERA, 1.22 WHIP, still serviceable, but not what the Astros want if they expect to make a deep playoff run. They need Verlander to at least come back and be somewhat as good as he'd been in the past. I don't think it's going to happen. To his credit, he's still able to keep the opposition off balance. He's in the 87th percentile in hard hit rate, but he's in the first percentile in ground ball rate, meaning he doesn't have many ground balls, doesn't coax many ground balls. Line drives and fly balls has been his MO this year, and that's not a good situation where you're playing in the best home run park in baseball. In 3 of his last 4 starts, he's allowed 4 earned runs or more while never lasting more than 5 innings. I think the Reds are going to get to him a little bit today. We're looking at a total where I think both pitchers are in trouble in this one. In fact, Julian Aguilar put up decent numbers in his first 2 starts, but it was clear he was pitching over his head. While watching those games, you could tell we would eventually look to fade him. A lot of lucky situations in those games that didn't result in runs, but he's let a lot of people on base, and they've started to hit him well. In fact, the negative regression started last week when the Oakland A's pounded him for 6 earned runs in 4 innings. And that was his first appearance in Great American Ballpark. His other 2 were on the road. Now he's back where he struggled last time out, and we see more of the same in this one as the Astros have more offensive talent than any of the 3 previous opponents. I expect this to be a high-scoring affair with 2 starters we could take advantage of. We're going to play the over in this one.
So this was sitting at 9.5 even this morning. There were 9.5s across the board last night. There were 9.5s this morning. Now we're seeing 9 juice to the under. So the markets are clearly disagreeing with you on this total. What are the markets seeing that you're not seeing? And can we take advantage of the extra value with the over in this ballgame?
Yeah, I think we can. I don't understand it unless they just thought the opening line was a little bit better than what they expected. I don't see any weather problems with any of the games going on today, so that's not a concern. I've seen Aguilar. I've watched every one of his starts. He's not a good starting pitcher. He's a rookie, and now he's facing the toughest offense that he's faced all season. And like I said about Verlander, all the credit in the world. He's a future Hall of Famer, first ballot, no doubt about it. But he just doesn't seem to have it this year. And like I said, this is not the ballpark you want to be in if you're giving up fly balls and line drives. You don't want to see him here. You don't want to see him in Philadelphia. You don't want to see him in Colorado. I think he gets hit today.
It's Bryan Leonard talking baseball, and once again, Bryan will be on with myself, Steve Merrill, this Friday at 11 a.m. Eastern on the MLB First Pitch Show, and you might want to watch because Bryan is number one MLB profits going all the way back to May 1st, and I'm number one in MLB profits over the last 30 days. There's still money to be made in baseball, and Bryan knows what he's talking about. He gave you 2 free plays here. You've also got a free divisional play in the NFL futures play on your page right now, and also, Bryan, I noticed you've got a strong best bet tonight in college football. Tell everybody about that game tonight, Boston College, Florida State.
Yeah, as I pointed out, we won yesterday 25-13, going back to last year in college football. Really like this game. I think there's some value here. I also have a 4% play in Major League Baseball. We rarely put out some 4s and 5s, but we've had a lot of success on it all season long. So it's a big 4% play in baseball. And you can get both of those right now on the website. And the 2 plays that I gave out here were my 2 free plays. So if you want to go back and read through that information again, that's on the site. But real excited right now. Football going on, baseball, best time of the season to bet baseball. And I believe this may be the last day we could take advantage of the buy 2 weeks, get 1 free. So if you're looking for 3 weeks of football and baseball, I think today's the best day to do it. In fact, it's the last day to do it before we go on to our next promotion.
Yeah, I was going to say this is a great time of the year to be playing all sports. This here on the show today, we're talking college football, pro football, and Major League Baseball, and a lot of cappers, including Bryan Leonard, Teddy covers, myself, Steve Merrill. We cover all 3 sports. And as Bryan said, today, Monday, Labor Day, your last chance to buy 2 weeks and get the 3rd week for free. It works out to just $9.50 a day. That works out to less than $5 a play on average for the next 21 days and nights of all sports, every play, every day. No promo code needed. Multiple cappers. Get Teddy, get Bryan, get myself, Steve Merrill. But do it before tonight because it is the last chance at WagerTalk.com. Teddy covers what bettors learned. I was going to ask you about your first college football game in a couple years, but it's Monday, so we got to do bad beats, bad bets, bad for the books. But maybe you can work the USC LSU game in somehow also.
Of course I'm going to work the USC LSU game in there somehow. There's a legit bad bet to talk about in that ball game. But we got to start with the bad beats. Of course, bad beats, bad bets, bad for the books. Do it every week on Monday during football season. The goal is, how did everyone do? A little recap of what just happened this past weekend from a betting standpoint. And when it comes to bad beats, college football, there were some fun ones already. Week 1, Lehigh plus the points against Army. Howard plus the points against Rutgers. I'm going to start with 2 FCS versus FBS games. Both of those ball games, Army didn't take a knee, punched in a touchdown with 20 seconds to play. Rutgers punched in a touchdown with 11 seconds to play to win by 37. Coaches not taking knees. Tough beats if you had Lehigh or Howard. No one had Lehigh or Howard. Some people, however, had TCU. Some people had the under in that ball game. Stanford bet 10.5 down to 7.5. They're down 10 with 36 seconds to play. What do? They kicked the field goal to only lose by 7. Of course, they did not recover the subsequent onside kick. The total in that game might have been even worse. Tough if you had Arizona State, but Arizona State wasn't necessarily the right side there. Not Arizona State, TCU, sorry. But the total was even worse. It's 20-17 with 7 minutes to go. The under 59.5, 60.5. You're as fine can be with 7 minutes left. Then it goes touchdown. Stanford goes for it on 4th down at their own 19-yard line, failed, touchdown, and then that last field goal. So you had 24 points in the last 7 minutes. It lands right on 61 under 60.5. No good. That one hurt. Indiana, a wise guy special on Saturday. The Hoosiers bet from minus 18 to minus 25.5. They led by 17 with a minute left, and then a 52-yard touchdown scamper. They were trying to run out the clock. 24-point win. Very lucky for anyone who bet them before game day. FIU still covered the closing number, but I don't think anyone actually bet the Panthers. And then, last but not least, prior to this past August, I can't remember losing winners due to rain in football. I lost a Hall of Fame game, and I had Kentucky minus 25.5. Or not lost. I ended up pushing on the Hall of Fame game because it got called for rain in the third quarter. Kentucky minus 25.5. They're up 31-0 in the third quarter. It is a blowout as far as blowout can be. Kentucky's going to run the ball down their throat. They're going to win that game by 50. Except the second round of thunderstorms came through, and the game gets canceled in the third quarter. 31-0 Wildcats. All wagers refunded. So, all right. There's your bad beats, or at least the ones that stood out to me. Bad bets. Let's see. They bet UConn plus 24 down to plus 19 at Maryland. Terps 50-7. It wasn't that close. UConn money all bad. They bet Clemson plus 13.5 down to 10.5. Tigers got annihilated by Georgia 34-3. All the Clemson money. Bad bets. West Virginia plus 12 down to plus 7.5. That was all Penn State start to finish, even with the long rain delay. 34-12. Nittany Lions and West Virginia money all bad bets. Somebody like UMass bet them from pick up to minus 3. They lost at home by 2 touchdowns to Eastern Michigan. The Minutemen, a bad bet. Late Saturday night, lots of Wyoming money bet down off the key number of 7 down to 6.5 against Arizona State. Well, Wyoming, no good. Sun Devil blew them out 48-7. And yesterday, of course, the game I was at, that Steve Merrill was just referencing, USC LSU. I debated between side and total in that game. Well, I bet side. I should have bet total. Total was bet from 62 up to 66.5/67. I was at the game. There was no over in play at any point in that contest. 27-20 Trojans, all the over money. Bad bets. When it comes to bad for the books, North Carolina, Minnesota, all the money poured in on the under. The game goes from Gophers minus 1.5 to Tar Heels minus 2.5. Lands right in the middle. UNC minus 2 after Minnesota misses the last second field goal. All the side money won. All the total money won. That was not a good result for the house. Another game lands right in the middle. Syracuse, Ohio, minus 14 to minus 17. The Orange win by exactly 16. Bad for the books. Northwestern under is already a problem for the books. Wildcats versus Miami opened 43, closed 39, 13-6 final. A truly riveting affair if you watched it start to finish. And Nevada covered wire to wire. Week 1, nearly upsetting SMU. They blew it late. No hangover. They were plus 15. Got bet down to plus 8 at Troy. They led that game wire to wire and won outright by a deuce. There you have it. Bad beats. Bad bets. Bad for the books. Back to you, Mr. Merrill.
Teddy, you said something very interesting there that I think I want to touch on. It talked about how those two, FBS teams punched in the late meaningless touchdowns against some bottom feeders. There were a lot of blowouts. We've talked about how big favorites do well in week 1. I took advantage of it again. I had a best bet on Alabama. I gave that up for free in a solo video. I gave out Texas for free in a solo video. Looking at some other ones on the FCS board, that FBS FCS board, there's 38 games, I believe. I think 16 of the 38, the losing FCS team scored 7 or less. I think 13 or 14 of them scored 3 or less. That stood out to me from week 1. But the big favorites covering, you got to wonder with the legalization of sports betting in 30-some states now, if the head coaches are more aware of the point spread now that it's legitimate and they know their backers might be happy if they cover late. Something to think about. I don't know. We'll have to keep an eye on it, but it's even more of a reason, I think, to be playing these big favorites in week 1, and we saw it work again this past Saturday. Teddy, any thoughts on that? I mean, in most states you can't bet on your local college team. Like you can't bet on Army in the New York area, but you got to wonder if that's in the back of these coaches' minds, the Bill Snyder effect from the 90s when you and I started.
So part of the reason I played Kentucky and laid the points with Kentucky in that game is because Stoops knows the point spread and sometimes talks about the point spread. And last year, week 1, made a concerted effort to cover the point spread at the end of the ball game, which they did. So it's certainly something that, in my mind, factors well. It's pro favorite. When you're talking about covering numbers and blowout games, you ask me, all right, plus 42, minus 42 opening day. Who do you want? Instinctively, I always want the minus 42 on opening day. That's the right way to go. So, yeah, we'll see lots of blowouts. Won't be the last time we see a weekend like this one. And now that we're seeing not necessarily running up the scores, but not taking a knee and the end result of what happens when you don't take a knee, good news for some favorites this past weekend.
Yeah, and I started off Friday night, my first college play of the season, Oklahoma, 51-3. And I had Kentucky as well on Saturday. Dope. That was painful. And, yeah, it's crazy, isn't it, that the first week of college football, the first week of the NFL preseason, we see 2 games cut in the third quarter, something we've seen maybe once in like 20 years up until the past month. Teddy covers
and
every
I had
Monday.
Them both, and I had the right sides in both of them. That's crazy. I mean, you never see it. I'm like, really?
What did you have in the preseason game, Teddy? Did you have the total or the side? Yeah, but a lot of books paid that out, didn't they? Some of the U.S. books now, which is kind of crazy, I think. But that was a little bit different.
Most books did not pay it out. A handful of books, because there wasn't a lot of money on it, and here we get some publicity for it. They paid out overs and unders, but it wasn't the majority of people that bet that. Certainly, if you bet that in Las Vegas, you didn't cash your ticket.
Correct. It's a 55-minute rule for those that are new to sports betting. It's got to go 55 of the 60 minutes in a football game, and obviously neither came close. Just how it goes. Works for you sometimes, works against you, but it worked against Teddy twice, so he is definitely due for a couple good beats instead of some bad breaks there in those. Let's get talking a little bit more with Jesse Schule now from WagerTalk.com. And Jesse's going to talk some college football in a moment for a game coming up here in week 2, another big favorite. But Jesse, first I want to talk baseball with you. And the Kansas City Royals are definitely a fascinating team to talk about. Teddy mentioned how the Cubs are making a run in that NL Central. Well, the Royals still have the second best run differential in the entire American League, ahead of the Astros, ahead of the Orioles, but they're sitting third in their own division right now, tied for one of the last wild card spots. So very curious what you're doing with this Guardians-Royals game. They're behind Cleveland by 3.5 in the division right now.
Yeah, Steve, it sounds like you're seeing it the same way I'm seeing it. And I think the bookmakers aren't quite giving enough respect to this Kansas City team. They've been on a tear in the second half of the season. They're averaging 5.4 runs per game since the All-Star break. Only one team has scored more runs than Kansas City during that time. The Royals at home, they're 41-28 at home. They're averaging 5.2 runs per game at home this season. Only 2 teams scoring more than that in their home ballpark. They did actually pass Cleveland last week when they won 3 of 4 at got a frog in my throat here. They won 3 of 4 at Cleveland. They ended up taking over first place. Now they've lost 5 straight since, but they're back home where they play well and they score more runs. And I think they've got a favorable pitching matchup here with Michael Wacha going, the veteran. Wacha's had surprisingly a pretty solid season so far. His numbers at home particularly good, 6-1 with a 3.13 ERA and 11 home starts. One of those was against Cleveland. He allowed 1 run on 7 hits, struck out 6 in 5 1/3. And he will go opposite Gavin Williams, who both these pitchers just faced the opposing team less than a week ago, or roughly a week ago. But Gavin Williams, not so optimistic about him. He's 1-4 with a 6.56 ERA in his last 5 starts. Like I say, this Royals team knocking the cover off the ball, very cheap price, but I think I will take Kansas City for the first 5 innings, minus 120 on the money line.
So Michael Wacha always reminds me of the Pac-Man, Waka, 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 just like, I don't know why.
Same here.
But he always does.
Ozzie Bear from the Muppets, Teddy. Waka, Waka.
Yeah. I want to talk about Cleveland here for a minute, all right? This is a Guardians team that wildly overachieved over the first half of the season. Even post-All-Star break, they were still pretty good. It feels like they're coming back to earth right now. Is there money to be made betting against the Guardians moving forward? If you bet against Cleveland every day for the next week or the next couple of weeks, are you going to make money? Is this a team you're looking to fade? Or is this more pro-KC, less anti-Cleveland?
Well, I think you're onto something, Teddy. I've been more pro-KC. I've been putting a lot of money on Kansas City team total overs, especially at home. Like I said, those home numbers, when you put them in the top 3 or the top 2 in Major League Baseball, and then you look at the price to back Kansas City, the 2 things don't add up, right? You got a team that's one of the best offensively in the majors in certain situations, and the bookmakers are not pricing them accordingly, in my opinion. So certainly pro Kansas City, but I think anti-Cleveland is also probably there's some value there as well. As you said, they were really strong offensively in the first half of the season, not so much in the second half. So yeah, you're onto something there, Teddy.
Jesse Schule talking Major League Baseball here on Wager Talk today. And don't forget, Jesse will be on First Pitch tomorrow with Adam Trigger on Tuesday, live at 11 a.m. Eastern. And not only do they break down several games, but they take live viewer questions on any games and player props you want to talk about. So check out MLB First Pitch every weekday at 11 a.m. Eastern, and then Wager Talk today right here at noon Eastern. And Jesse, I referenced my first college football best bet was last Friday night, an easy 51-3 blowout with Oklahoma. By the way, Dan Alexander, who hosts First Pitch, he gave that out for free the day before on the baseball show. Yet another reason to watch this week. But you're going to look at this Oklahoma game coming up this week. Now they're about a 4-touchdown favorite after being a 6-touchdown favorite. Is the line too high, or do we lay it once again with the Sooners?
To be honest with you, Steve, I don't think they can set this line high enough. I don't know if you saw Houston in week 1 losing 27-7 at home against UNLV. That's a UNLV team with a brand new quarterback. And, you know, you look at that game, you look at the box score, it doesn't look like UNLV did all that much. I mean, they ran for 198 yards. Their yards per carry wasn't that particularly high. I mean, I think Oklahoma is going to run all over this Houston team. I think the punter can go out and get drunk on Friday night because he will not be needed on Saturday. No punting for Oklahoma. And you look at the quarterback situation for Houston, Donovan Smith, 2 picks, I think 50% completions. Yeah, the young guy came in and led a touchdown drive in the dying seconds in garbage time. A little bit difficult to read too much into that, even if he may get the start. I mean, if he gets the start this week, it'll be his first career start on the road at Oklahoma. Not a great spot. It just looks like this Houston team is in full rebuild mode, and they're running into a buzzsaw at Oklahoma. You look at Oklahoma last year, they opened the season with a 73-point win over Arkansas State. They followed that up 2 weeks later by beating Tulsa by 50. The state of this Houston team, I can't see them within 30 points of Oklahoma. So I'm going to lay it with the Sooners.
So I want to talk about Oklahoma's game against Temple, a game that I watched, and a game that I think had a wildly overrated final score, a final score that was wildly misleading compared to how the game was played. Temple was pretty awful. Temple can't move the football. I don't think they're going to move the football against anyone. But their defense, for extended stretches of that game, blew up Oklahoma at the line of scrimmage. Oklahoma finished the game. You want to talk about a concerning number inside a box score. Against Temple, Oklahoma goes 1 of 12 on third downs. They punted 5 times against that team. How confident are you that Oklahoma is as good as a final score would indicate? And isn't this a classic, you're buying high and selling low? Because Houston's off an awful game and Oklahoma's off a 51-3 win. It feels to me that we're, are you buying high and selling low here, or am I missing something? Is Oklahoma better?
Like I said, I think that it's more anti-Houston than pro-Oklahoma, Teddy. I mean, if we talked last week, I would say there's no way Houston's anywhere near as bad as Temple. At this point, they looked pretty bad. I'm not going to say they're quite as bad as Temple, but they're a lot closer than I would have thought based on what I saw against UNLV. And 27.5 is a lot lower than the almost 50 they had to cover against Temple. So, I think it's a matter of fading Houston rather than buying high on Oklahoma.
Jesse Schule talking some college football, talking some Major League Baseball with us. And, of course, you can get all of his best bets at WagerTalk.com. Jesse, I love what you got going tonight. You got a 3-pack, I believe. And you mentioned, hey, look, I didn't have a great weekend, but I've been just incredible, 41-12 the last 2 years in August and September college football. So bounce back mode tonight, my friend.
You betcha. I got 3 plays in the Boston College FSU game, and I did nail that Georgia Tech Florida State game in Ireland in my video on WagerTalk TV. I told people to sprinkle on the money line with Georgia Tech. So I was not surprised with what I saw in Ireland, but I think I got a good read on what's going to happen tonight in Tallahassee. So definitely worth checking that out. Probably well worth the $29.
It's Jesse Schule. You can find him not only at WagerTalk.com, but of course here on WagerTalk TV with tons of solo free play videos. Yet another reason to click subscribe and hit the bell for instant alerts when these shows go live, but more importantly, when all the free play videos for baseball and football go up each and every day. I've got some free play baseball videos that'll be up in about an hour this afternoon, and Jesse does a great job with those free play videos throughout the week with football as well here on WagerTalk TV. Teddy, before we get to Brian Power to finish out the show, let's do a little big game breakdown. You're going to talk about one of the newest additions to the ACC. It's a non-conference game, but it's a Friday night national TV game for your big game breakdown.
Sure is. ESPN2 Friday night, BYU versus SMU. Right now, look at the WagerTalk live odds screen. We've seen a fair bit of BYU money this morning. This was 12 last night, 11.5 last night. Now I'm seeing 10/10.5 for SMU as home favorites. Total 55.5 in this ballgame. And pardon my language, but SMU took a fuck ton of money on the opening night in Nevada, really. There were two betting groups that were warring it out for a while. One of them had as much as they wanted, and the other group just kept betting more SMU, all the way up to -28. They only scored 29 points. Needed a big fourth quarter rally just to win the game at all. Hard to cover -28 when you only scored 29. That said, they put together a big fourth quarter rally, both sides of the football, to win a season opener in a tough road environment. Even though they never sniffed a cover, I view that as a positive for SMU. Last week it was 42-7 at the half against Houston Christian. Not that Houston Christian could play with them, but it was SMU showing what they could do, 7 yards per carry, 10 yards per pass attempt. You know, this is a team that won 11 games last year in the ACC ready. Rhett Lashley went 5-1 ATS's home chalk last year. You know, offensively, they scored 37 points per game or more each of the last 5 years. And boy, they have elite speed. I see BYU with significant problems defensively against SMU's speed in this ballgame. But I do have questions for SMU about their defensive front and their secondary. We saw that in the game against Nevada. Now, BYU's coming off a 5-7 season. You know, Kalani Sitake is again predicted to be near the bottom of the Big 12 again this year. Since 2020, they're just 3-6 ATS, the road dog. That being said, they did pull an early season upset last year against Arkansas as a road dog. Turned out Arkansas wasn't any good either, but at the time we didn't know that. That said, last year on the road, they allowed 31 at Arkansas, then 38, 44, 35, 37, and 40. Yikes. You know, 40 did come in double overtime. It was actually only 13 after third quarter, but the defense fell apart late. BYU just looked just fine in their tune-up game against Southern Illinois last week. Jake Retzlaff, the new starting quarterback, he played in 4 games last year. They went 0-4 in those games. 1-0 this year. More than 11 yards per pass attempt. BYU's totals, they're still deflated. The offense fell apart last year. Now they have a quarterback. They're big up front, really big. They're playing a team that can score and a team that has some defensive questions. I like the over in this ballgame. 55, the current prevailing number, 55.5, up to 56, I think is very reasonable to get involved. We can expect a high-scoring affair on Friday night. Look for SMU and BYU over. And, of course, if you want to take advantage, starting tomorrow, Tuesday, September 3rd, 3-day all-sports, all-access pass, only $49. Get that right now, or get that starting tomorrow, I should say, starting on Tuesday at WagerTalk.com. Steve?
And if you buy it tomorrow, Teddy, you get Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and you've already got the Friday play from Teddy Covers. So it's like a 4-day pass, thanks to his big game breakdown here on WagerTalk TV. And once again, that special, that 3-day special starts tomorrow, as Teddy mentioned. Prez and Teddy will have more information on the Tuesday show. But if you want to get 21 days, today, Labor Day, is your last chance because it's buy 2 weeks, get that third week free of all sports. Works out to just $9.50 a day. That's less than $5 per play for any and all cappers that you want. Teddy Covers, Steve Merrill, or even our next guest, Brian Power, who's going to talk some college and NFL football with us, Brian. We're going to save a NFL futures play here for the end of the show in just a moment. But first, you want to talk about a college football total. Georgia Tech, Syracuse. That is a true ACC game, I believe. I can't keep track of these new conferences. What are you doing with this over-under?
Yeah, so I was obviously on the show Friday, as Teddy remembers, and I thought I made a pretty compelling case for fading Georgia Tech in what was a bad situational spot. But Teddy, as astute as he always is, he asked me the question, well, is Georgia State good enough to take advantage? The answer was no, unfortunately. But it should be pointed out, guys, twice Georgia State was stopped on downs inside the 10 in that game. Another time they settled for a field goal when on the Georgia Tech 1-yard line. They dropped a 2-point conversion that would have put them in the money in the fourth quarter. And 2 of the Yellow Jackets touchdowns came on fourth down plays. So you ask me, it was a case of right handicap, wrong result. So I kind of assumed that I would come on here today and want to fade Georgia Tech again, especially since I thought Syracuse was a little unlucky not to cover against my alma mater, Ohio U, on Saturday. There was a phantom holding call late in that game following a 44-yard completion. If it would have stood, Houston would have been in the red zone. They could have at least kicked the field goal, and they would have covered. Alas, they did not. Georgia Tech, we should point out, guys, talking about bad scheduling spots, 3rd week in a row traveling. The old Dublin back to Atlanta up to New York trip. That's a tough way to start the year. And they've never been a road favorite under Brent Key, oh, by the way. But why I'm looking at the total, Steve and Teddy, is I'm a little concerned about this Syracuse defense that it gave up 22 points to my alma mater. That's a bad Ohio offense that had almost no returning production. The great quarterback from the last couple of years, Curtis Rourke, he's off to Indiana. And Cuse now, they lost a starting linebacker to injury. So, as good as Haynes King has looked so far for Georgia Tech, and by the way, Syracuse's new quarterback, Kyle McCord, of course, the transfer from Ohio State, he threw for a career-high 354 last week. So the quarterbacks, they're impressing me. And my lean now is to the over. Obviously, it's an indoor game, no weather concerns. Georgia Tech should have given up more points last week. Syracuse, Teddy, better than Georgia State. They could take advantage and at least find the end zone a few more times.
So you're looking at the over in that ballgame. So here's a Georgia Tech team. And let me ask you this. When we watch Florida State today, if Florida State's offense works today in a way that it didn't work last week against Georgia Tech, will that change your opinion about the Georgia Tech defense? Because all I see from Georgia Tech defense is they're making stops so far. Not a team I want to bet in the over 60s, you know? So talk to me about how the FSU game today is going to affect your thoughts on this game.
Sure, I guess it could have a minor effect, but remember I talked about on Friday that Georgia Tech-Florida State game was really odd. Each team only had 7 possessions. The offenses were quite efficient with what the limited possessions they had. So I actually don't think it's probably going to have that much of an effect. I just look at what Georgia Tech did last week, or what they got away with. Teddy, you were right. Georgia State was not good enough to take advantage of a spot I think a lot of teams in America would have covered against Georgia Tech. Syracuse, there's high hopes under Fran Brown. I like what I saw from McCord. I'm scared about the defense, though. You're right. It's a high total when you think about Georgia Tech and Syracuse the last years, but it's high for a reason. I think the offenses go up and down the field, the Carrier Dome this weekend.
Brian Power talking some college football here on Wager Talk today. And Brian, we're going to talk some NFL here to finish up the show. And the NFL, of course, kicks off here with week 1 later this week on Thursday, Friday games, a ton of Sunday games. You're going to look at a futures play for the AFC South. And this is a fascinating division to me because last year, of course, the Texans go from having the number 2 draft pick finishing 3-13-1 and winning the division at 10-7. Jacksonville just missed out at 9-8. The Jags, by the way, had won the division the year before with a 9-8 record just 2 years after going 1-15. So these teams definitely flip around fast. We've had 3 different winners the last 3 years, I believe. Who do you like winning this AFC South division this year in the NFL?
Well, it's. I think the Jags have a chance to win the division, Steve. But I like it. This is going to be to make the playoffs bet. It's kind of a hedge.
Oh, I'm sorry, I misread it. Okay, cool.
Oh, it's no problem. It's no problem at all. But let's talk because you set this up well, Steve. This time last year, what was the deal? The Jaguars were the odds-on favorite to win the AFC South. They were actually bigger favorites to win the division at this time last year than Houston is right now, which is really interesting in my opinion. They were coming off the playoff run that you mentioned, Steve. They won a playoff game. They had that insane comeback against the Chargers, typical Brandon Staley. That's why he's no longer the head coach there. And what did the Jags do last year, guys? They started 8-3. So they were in great positions. Like, here we go again. This is a team on the rise. Doug Peterson. Well, Trevor Lawrence gets hurt. So does Christian Kirk. They sputter down the stretch. They end up 9-8. And as you said, Steve, on the outside looking in, when it came to the playoffs, turnovers were a problem. Lawrence was also betrayed by a receiving core that had a lot of drops. Let's go to this year right now, the present. No one seems to be talking about the Jags. So I started looking into it because I think they should be, because you look at the AFC playoff picture. I'm going to throw a lot at you here, Teddy, okay, that you're going to be able to come back at me with. Let's look at the AFC playoff picture as a whole and why I think the Jags can get in. Right now, there's 3 teams that are odds on in the AFC East. I do not think all 3 of those teams are going to make the playoffs. Bills, Dolphins, Jets. I think you're going to get no more than 2 in the North. I think that's a division that cannibalizes itself. West, it's just Kansas City. I think the books are a little too high on the Harbaugh hire first year. Denver, maybe they'll go over their win total, but they're not a playoff team. And I think the Raiders, after the rah-rah of Pierce, will take a step back. So if there's 2 teams from the East, 2 teams from the North, you get the division winner of the South, division winner of the West. That still leaves a spot. And I think it's the Jaguars for the taking. You look at some of the other markets. Over 8.5 wins is priced minus 120. But to make the playoffs, it's plus 130. Yes, there's a world where they could go 9-8 again and miss the playoffs. But I think that's a pretty narrow, kind of a small needle to thread there. I'll take my chances. And by betting them to make the playoffs, guys, we don't have to worry about whether or not Houston wins the division, which I think very much they could. They're loaded with C.J. Stroud coming back. So my bet on the Jacksonville Jaguars for 2024 is plus 130 to make the playoffs. I think this was a good team last year that just had a bad finish.
So when we look at the AFC, New England's not going to make the playoffs. I think that's reasonable. All right, so no Patriots. Tennessee is certainly not likely to make the playoffs.
Great.
The Raiders and Broncos, I would say, also long shots. So that's 4 teams we can go into out of the 16 that are pretty much going into the season, barring a shock, not going to be there. That being said, Houston was a shock last year. It's not unusual to see one shock team, and we still have, in theory, 12 other teams that are alive for 7 playoff spots. You're getting a plus 120, plus 120, plus 125 here, and you're locking up your money all year. You gave these predictions about, I think only 2 teams from the North and only 2 teams to the East. How confident are you in that? Because I'm not confident in any of that. I'd say these are 12 teams that are alive to make the postseason. Why 2 teams here and 3 teams there in a scenario where obviously right now we're only looking at projections. We really don't know how good these teams actually are.
Sure. Look, I think and again, I don't know if we should need to go through all 12 of those teams, but I'll just kind of pick some of the ones where there's variance. The Jets obviously are a team that a lot of people expect to improve. But let's forget, Aaron Rodgers hasn't had a good season in quite a while. Obviously, he gets injured right away last year. I didn't think he was that good his last year for the Packers. It was shades of Dan Marino his last year in Miami. He's yelling at the receivers all time. He's on peyote. He's doing whatever he's doing, going to Burning Man. I don't know if it's no guarantee that Aaron Rodgers is great. Same with Deshaun Watson in Cleveland. That's a playoff team from last year that I'm not confident goes. Watson was 41st in EPA last year. I think that's a team. And look, I know you're going to throw the Tomlin stat right back at me, and I've been wrong, I think, my entire adult life. But I think this is the year the Steelers are going to regress, okay? I'm going to die on the hill. It will happen one year, and if I keep saying it every year, one year I'll be right. I'm not as high on the Colts in the South either. And you look at the South, everyone just assumes the South will get one team in. It could be just the Jags. If, heaven forbid, if C.J. Stroud were to get hurt. Steve laid it out that this AFC South has been wild, right? Houston 2 years ago was at the bottom. They jump all the way up to the top. There's something called the plexiglass principle. Bill James talked about it in it's one of the few books behind me that I've actually read. So they may not make the jump again next year. So I think there's a lot of variance with these teams. I just look at the Jaguars, Teddy, as a very solid team for the last 2 years. I don't think they're worse. I don't see them doing worse than last year. So I think it's 10 wins this year. And if they win 10 games, I think they will make the playoffs then for sure.
10 wins, they make the playoffs. By the way, Brian, they were one of 3 teams in the AFC last year that went 9-8, did not make it. 2 in the NFC, so 5 9-8 teams did not make the postseason last year. But 10 wins will get them in. By the way, our friends at Bet Online and Dave Mason, lead odds maker, there will be on Thursday talking with Teddy. Maybe you can even ask him about some divisional futures. But they've got the Texans even money, Jags at plus 270, Colts 3-1, Tennessee Titans 9-1. So if you do like the Jags to make the playoffs, a little sprinkle on that division winner probably is not a bad thing, especially if you think the Texans, who went 3-13 last year, are going to regress this year, which I think they might. Great stuff from Brian Power. Brian, Teddy covers his opening line report here in 15 minutes. He turns to a pumpkin in 1 minute. What do you got going on at WagerTalk.com?
4% best bet. It was a great weekend, guys. Went 3-1 on Sunday. It's been a great start to the college football season. We've won 6 straight totals in all sports. This best bet for Monday is a total. Guys, I've had 3 college football totals so far. All 3 of them have cashed by double digits. Teddy, you knew I had to take the under on LSU USC. When you were sitting in the stadium last night, I bet that was the first thought on your mind. But this is a Major League Baseball total, and that's okay. We've hit 70% on the dime in the last 9 days. So very excited for this one play on a beautiful Labor Day. WT.buzz/BP.
That's Brian Power. You can also find him on the baseball show throughout the week. He was on today on Monday, so go watch that replay with Mark Zeno breaking down several games on the Monday card. Once again, hit subscribe, hit the bell for instant alerts. I got 2 free play baseball videos coming up in about an hour, so hit that bell for an instant alert. Thumbs up, like, comment below. We read all the comments and we reply back. And don't forget, this Labor Day Monday is your last chance to buy 2 weeks, get the 3rd week for free. No promo code needed. Every capper right now at WagerTalk.com, including Brian Power, Teddy Covers, and myself, Steve Merrill. Teddy, you got 14 minutes until opening line report. Take us home.
Yeah, the clock's ticking, though. It'll be 13 by the time I'm done. But
My
that's going to wrap
goodness.
it for the Monday edition of Wager Talk Today. We'll do it again tomorrow. Same time, same channel. 9 a.m. here on the left coast, noon for you back east. Your Sports Central for gamblers. Like Steve said, stay tuned for the NFL opening line report coming up at the top of the hour. And between now and tomorrow's show, enjoy the games and best of luck with all your bets.